I think when we look at the world at the moment, we see that the liberal script for the last 60, 70 years has been kind of the one idea that the Western societies have agreed upon, that it's, the kind of norms and values that we want to subscribe to as societies. And part of the liberal scripts are human rights. When we look what is happening in the Mediterranean Sea, what is happening outside the shores of Australia, what is happening on the Mexican-US-American border, we actually see human rights violations. And I think here is why I think that it is so important to talk about borders in the liberal script, because it is our responsibility if we want to live in a liberal society. I think one of the most important experiences for me was when I was studying abroad in the United States, because it was really a different experience in terms of studying. It really opened my eyes to the field of migration and research on borders. And when I came back to Germany, at that point in time, we had this so-called refugee crisis happening. So two things came together: real-life events happening and this new interest I had in studying migration and border phenomena. My research interest really lies in the topic or the world of borders and border control. So in my research, I always start with the question: who has the right to move across space, to move where? And when we look at this question, how do states enforce these restrictions or these controls? And I focus very much on the European Union, on the Schengen area. So who's allowed to come to the Schengen area or not? And how does the European Union make sure that people can come or cannot come? What fascinates me the most is how borders have become projected into the digital space. So how are borders and border controls enacted digitally? What kind of data do states collect, save, store, exchange? And what does that mean for the people that these data are taken from or stored about? So in my case, I'm very much interested in biometric technology, because biometric data is also one of the data types that has kind of made a revolution in the European border control universe. So other researchers have shown how these systems work, but I'm more interested in why do people think that it's a good idea to use smart borders? What is the motive behind smart borders? So I learned about scripts in the last year of my master's program, and I think mostly because I was exploring the idea of doing a PhD and doing some research on what PhD programs are out there. For me, scripts was attractive in, I would say, 3 distinct ways. First, it's in Berlin, and I wanted to stay here because I think Berlin brings together like great research opportunities and also just a very fascinating and inspiring place to live. Then secondly, I like the idea that it's a structured PhD program in comparison to an individual doctorate. And then thirdly, the topic of scripts. So contestations of the liberal script and how that ties in with border contestations, with border phenomena, to me was just something that I thought is very timely when we look at what's happening in the world at the moment. So there are always different opportunities provided by the overall SCRIPTS network and the different institutions, whether it is Freie Universität or WZB or the Hertie School. I mean, there are different workshops that are set up or advertised by the SCRIPTS program. So at some point you actually have to make really good choices because, I mean, there are many options to choose from. So you always have to ask yourself, is this relevant to my research? So right from the beginning of the program, we actually, we as the new cohort, we've been in contact with the different coordinators on the different levels, which has been super helpful to have these different meetings where everything is being explained and you get to know how everything works. You don't have to be afraid to reach out to someone with a question, which I absolutely appreciate. I mean, if you ask me to dream big, I'd say 10, 15 years from now to have a classroom in front of me with first-year bachelor students to you know, come into the room and be like, this is your introduction to political science, welcome. I would totally see myself doing that, to stay in academia, to be a teacher, to be a professor. But yeah, I think, you know, you never know how life plays out. I'd also be happy to work outside of academia, maybe in a think tank, in a consulting position.